A good day, everyone. We would be discussing the mastering sampling techniques together, statistics and probability performance tests, and I would like to start with the introduction to sampling techniques. So, what is sampling in research? When we talk about sampling in research, we're really discussing how to pick a smaller group of people from a larger population to take part in a study. This is super important for gathering data efficiently and getting insights without having to involve every single person in that target group, which would be a huge hassle and take way too long. For example, if you're looking into how public speaking affects the academic performance of students in the humanities and social sciences strand, it wouldn't make sense to try and survey every student in that category. That would take forever. Instead, you would choose a smaller, more manageable group of students, known as a sample, to gather their thoughts and experiences. The insights you get from this group can then be used to represent the larger population, which is the main point of sampling. Okay, so moving on, what makes sampling important in research? Sampling is a key part of research methodology because it allows researchers to save time and resources while still collecting important data. The aim of it is to make conclusions that can be trusted to apply to the broader population based on what you learn from the sample. This presentation will give a clear overview of the different types of sampling methods used in research, focusing mainly on two categories: the probability sampling and non-probability sampling. Knowing about these methods will help researchers pick the best approach for their studies.
In this informational video, you will learn about sampling. We will give an insight about sampling, tackle its importance, and discuss the difference between probability and non-probability sampling and its types as well. We will also dig into the concept of sampling biases and its implications. Under the probability sampling, we'll dive into sampling types wherein every member of the population has a zero chance to be part of the research. Basically, under probability sampling, we will learn about simple random sampling, stratified random sampling, cluster sampling, and systematic sampling. On the other hand, the non-probability sampling is consists of sampling where there is an unequal selection on the members of the population. Under the non-probability sampling, we will tackle about convenience sampling, quota sampling, and snowball sampling. But aside from that, on this video, we will also discuss the potential causes of bias and error in sampling. For example, the sample bias, non-response bias, and strategies for minimizing them.
Hello everyone! Today we will explore the interesting world of simple random sampling. So, what is simple random sampling? It is a statistical technique whereby each individual of a population is provided with an independent and equal chance of being part of the sample. This assures that the sampling process is free from bias and random. Simple random sampling involves picking people or items at random from a population where every member has an equivalent probability of selection. The only goal is to achieve a sample that is representative of the entire population. For example, if a company wants to get feedback from its customers, it can use simple random sampling by selecting randomly a number of customers to be interviewed. This method is most appropriate where the population is homogeneous and also where there is no specific subgroup that needs to be dealt with. Here is the picture of simple random sampling. So, here is the methods of simple random sampling. Lottery approach. Put down the names or identification of each member of the population on paper slips, stir them up, and randomly pull slips. Example, random drawing of students' names from a hat to select a group. Random number selection. Give each member of the population a number and randomly select numbers using a random generator. Example, utilizing a software such as Excel or a random number software to pick participants from a list. Here is the process. Identify the population of interest, calculate sample size with precision, variability, and available resources in mind. Assign a distinct identifier to each population member. Select individuals randomly with techniques such as simple, systematic, or stratified sampling. Obtain data via surveys, interviews, observations, or experiments. Compute data with statistical analysis. Interpret findings considering study limitations and recommending future research directions. So, this is the end of our exploring the simple random sampling, and thank you for listening.
Hello everyone. Before we begin, let me ask you a quick question. Have you ever tried to conduct a survey or research and realized that some groups were either overrepresented or completely left out? That's where stratified sampling comes in. Today, we're gonna discuss what stratified sampling is, why it's important, and how it ensures that different groups in population are fairly represented. By the end of this presentation, you'll understand how this method improves research accuracy and eliminates bias. So, let's dive in and explore the world of stratified sampling. And now this is our lesson outline. Describe the stratified sampling process and its purposes. Explain how strata are formed and give practical example. What is stratified random sampling? Stratified sampling is a technique used in research and statistics where a population is divided into distinct subgroups called strata based on shared characteristics, example, age, gender, income level. Then, a sample is taken from each stratum, either proportionally or equally, to ensure that all groups are properly represented in the study. This method improves accuracy and reduces bias, especially when there are significant differences between the subgroups within a population. Stratified random sampling purpose. Stratified sampling ensures that specific subgroups or strata within a population are fairly represented in the study. It is used to improve accuracy and reliability by reducing variability within each subgroups. Minimize sampling bias by ensuring all key groups are included. Provide better comparison among different groups within the populations. Process of stratified random sampling. Number 1. Identify the population. Define the entire group from which the sample will be drawn. Number 2. Determine the strata. Divide the population into distinct, non-overlapping subgroups based on a relevant characteristic. Example, age, gender, income level. Number 3. Select a sampling method for each stratum. Choose whether to use proportional or equal allocation. Proportional allocation. The number of participants from each stratum is based on the size of the subgroup within the population. Equal allocation. The same number of participants is selected from each stratum, regardless of subgroup size. Number 4. Randomly select participants. Within each stratum, use a random sampling method to select individuals. Number 5. Combine the selected samples. The chosen participant from all strata form the final sample for analysis. Now, let's proceed on formation of strata and practical example. Strata are formed based on characteristics relevant to study, such as demographic factors, age, gender, ethnicity, income level. Example, survey on spending habits by income groups, academic performance, high average and low achievers. Example, research on study habits among students with different performance levels. Geographical location, urban, suburban, and rural areas. Example, study on internet access across different regions. Employment status, full-time, part-time, unemployed. Example, workforce trends analysis. Now, let's proceed on practical example of stratified sampling. Imagine a university wants to conduct a survey about student satisfaction with campus facilities. The total student population consists of 10,000 students across different year levels. Freshmen, first year, 3,000 students. Sophomores, second year, 2,500 students. Juniors, third year, 2,000 students. Seniors, fourth year, 1,500 students. Since each year level may have different experiences and opinions, the university decided to use stratified sampling to ensure that students from all year levels are fairly represented. Want to survey 1,000 students, they will select participants proportionally from each year level. Freshmen, 3,000 divided by 10,000 times 1,000 equals to 300 students. Sophomores, 2,500 divided by 10,000 times 1,000 equals to 250 students. Juniors, 2,000 divided by 10,000 times 1,000 equals to 200 students. Seniors, 1,500 divided by 10,000 times 1,000 equals to 150 students. By using stratified sampling, the survey ensured that options from all year level are included, making the result more accurate and representative of entire student body.
Hello everyone, I'm your presenter number 4, and today I will be discussing cluster sampling, its steps, typical use cases, and how it compares with stratified sampling. But first of all, what is cluster sampling? Cluster sampling is a method used in research when studying a large population. Instead of selecting individuals one by one, we divide the population into groups called clusters, and then randomly select some clusters. Everyone in the chosen clusters become part of the set. Next, let's proceed to the steps on how to conduct a cluster sampling. Let me give you some step by step. To conduct a cluster sampling, we first define the population to identify the group you want to study. Then, we divide it into smaller groups called clusters. Next, we randomly select some of these clusters instead of individuals. And last, we collect data from all members in the chosen clusters. And now let's proceed to typical use cases of cluster sampling. Cluster sampling is useful in many fields. In education research, instead of selecting individual students, researchers can pick entire school. In healthcare naman, they can study all patients from randomly chosen hospitals. Businesses also use cluster sampling to analyze customer preferences in selected neighborhoods. And now, let's compare cluster sampling with stratified sampling. Ano nga bang pinagkaiba nilang dalawa? Cluster and stratified sampling are both used to divide a population, but they are different. In cluster sampling, we randomly select whole cluster and study everyone in them. In stratified sampling, we divide the population into groups based on shared characteristics and take a sample from each group. Cluster sampling is easier for large population, while stratified sampling ensures better representation. But let me give you some insight about stratified sampling. Stratified random sampling is a way to pick people for a study by dividing them into smaller groups called strata, based on similar traits like age, gender, or income. Then a few random people chosen from each group to make sure all groups are fairly represented in the final sample. Next, let me give you some example of stratified sampling. Here's an example of stratified sampling. In stratified sampling, they divide employees into groups based on departments like HR, IT, or sales, and randomly select individuals from each group. This ensures all departments are represented, leading to more balanced results. And let me give you some example on cluster sampling. Imagine a company wants to survey employee satisfaction. Using cluster sampling, they randomly select entire branches and survey all employees in those locations. This makes data collection easier but may not fully represent all employees. Overall, cluster sampling is useful in practical method for selecting samples, especially when studying a large population. It is commonly used in education, healthcare, and market research. Compared to stratified sampling, it is more efficient but may be less precise. Understanding these methods help in making research decisions.
Good day, everyone. I'm Fiona Ramos, and today we're going to explore a fascinating statistical method known as systematic sampling. Systematic sampling is a method used to select a sample from a larger population by choosing elements at regular intervals, after starting from a randomly selected point. This technique is particularly useful for efficiently gathering data from large populations without needing to survey every individual. It is defined as a probability sampling method where researchers select every individual from a population list beginning with a randomly chosen starting point. The interval is determined by dividing the total population size by the desired sample size. Here are the process of systematic sampling. First, determine the population size. Identify the total number of individuals in the population. Second, decide sample size. Decide how many individuals you want to include in your sample. Third, calculate sampling intervals. Compute by dividing the population size by the sample size. Fourth, select random starting point. Randomly choose a starting point within the first interval. Lastly, select sample members. From the starting point, select every member until the desired sample size is reached. Advantage of systematic sampling. First, simplicity. Easy to implement and understand. Requires only a list and a fixed interval. Second, time efficient. Faster than simple random sampling since only one random selection is needed initially. Third, uniform coverage ensures every distribution across the population, minimizing clustering effects. Fourth, reduce bias helps mitigate selection bias due to its structured approach. Biases associated with volunteer sampling. Self-selection bias. Participants who choose to volunteer may have strong opinions or specific interests, leading to results that do not represent the broader population. This can skew data towards more extreme views. Limited generalizability. Findings from volunteer samples may not be applicable to the general population, as they often reflect only the views of those who chose to participate. Response bias. Volunteers might provide answers they believe researchers expect, influenced by social desirability, which can further distort results. Limitations. Periodic bias risk. If there is an underlying pattern in the population that corresponds with the sampling interval, it may lead to biased results. Requires complete list. Effective only when a complete and accurate list of the population is available. Otherwise, it may not be represent the population accurately. Potential for underrepresentation or overrepresentation. Certain segments of the population may be overrepresented or underrepresented, depending on how individuals are spaced out in the list.
In this video, we're gonna tackle about convenience sampling. So what is convenience sampling? Convenience sampling is a non-probability sampling method where the researchers select a participant based on their availability and their willingness to participate. Convenience sampling is often used in qualitative research. It is also often used in social sciences and education where it's convenient to use pre-existing groups such as students. On the next slide, how does it conducted? Convenience sampling is conducted by selecting a participant who are already available and who are willing to participate.
This allows researchers to gather data easily. Researchers then recruit participants by approaching them directly, often in person, through phone calls, emails, or social media platforms. Participation is typically voluntary, meaning individuals choose whether or not to take part in the study. What is the drawbacks of convenience sampling? So, convenience sampling has several drawbacks because participants are not randomly selected that may affect the overall population. Convenience sampling can introduce several types of research bias, such as selection bias and sampling bias that may affect the reliability of the findings. When does convenience sampling appropriate? Convenience sampling can be appropriate by seeking preliminary insights by doing a survey questions for a pilot study. Convenience sampling allows you to quickly test methods, questions, or interventions before implementing them on a larger scale. It is appropriate when you need a quick, cost effective way to gather data for exploratory research, pilot studies, or when a representative sample isn't crucial or when resources and time are limited. So, thank you for listening. I hope you learn about what is convenience sampling.
Good day, everyone. Today we will delve into the concept of voluntary sampling, a non-probability sampling technique where participants self-select to take part in research studies. This method is particularly valuable for gathering qualitative data on topics that resonate with participants. Let's explore some typical application of voluntary sampling. Number one, surveys and questionnaires. Often seen in online surveys, individuals can voluntarily respond to questions such as those related to environmental issues or product feedback. Focus groups. Companies frequently recruit participants who are interested in their products or services to provide feedback through discussion. Specialized populations. This method is especially useful for studying groups such as cancer support communities or environmental conservation volunteers. Here, participants are typically motivated and engaged. Next slide. To illustrate the concept of voluntary sampling, let's consider the real life situations involving a well known beverage company. Imagine that this company wants to launch a new line of organic juices. Instead of conducting random sampling, they decide to use voluntary sampling by inviting customers who have previously purchased organic products to participate in online survey. Through this survey, the company gathers feedback on flavor preference, packaging designs, and pricing. While they receive valuable insights from enthusiastic customers, they also encountered biases. The responses may reflect the opinions of health conscious individuals rather than the general populations who may not prioritize organic products. Additionally, those who choose to participate may have strong preference for organic products, leading to sweet data that does not represent broader market trend. While voluntary sampling has its benefits, it also comes with several biases that researchers must consider. Number one, self-selection biases. Participants who choose to volunteer often have strong opinions or specific interests. This can lead to results that do not accurately represent the broader population and may skew data towards more extreme views. Number two, limited generalizability. Finding more volunteers samples may not be applicable to general population as they reflect only the views of those who choose to participate. Number three, response bias. Volunteers might provide answers that they believe researchers expect due to social desirability, further distorting results. Next, let's discuss the ethical consideration associated with voluntary sampling. Informed consent. It is essential for participants to understand the nature of the study and their role in it. Researcher must ensure that consent is obtained without any coercion. Privacy and confidentiality. Protecting the identities and responses of participants is crucial. especially when dealing with sensitive topics. This helps maintain trust and uphold ethical standards. Representation. Ethical concerns arise if certain demographics are underrepresented due to self-selection. This can lead to incomplete or biased findings that affect decision making based on the research outcomes. In conclusion, while voluntary sampling offers advantage such as cost effectiveness and accessibility, it also represents significant biases and ethical challenges that researchers must navigate carefully. Understanding these elements is vital for conducting effective and responsible research.
Good day, everyone. My name is Graven a Pagsuguiron, and today I'll be discussing a fascinating research technique, snowball sampling. This method offers unique advantages, especially when dealing with elusive populations, and I'll show you why it's a powerful tool for researchers. What is snowball sampling? Snowball sampling, also known as chain referral sampling, is an probability sampling method. Think of it like a snowball rolling downhill. It starts small, but gathers momentum in size as it goes. We begin with a small group of individuals who meet our specific research criteria. Then, we ask them to refer us to others who also fit the criteria. This referral process continues, expanding our sample size organically. It is particularly useful when dealing with populations that are difficult to identify or access through traditional methods. Who developed snowball sampling? While the concept has evolved over time, the technique is generally attributed to James S. Coleman's 1958 work, Relational Analysis, the study of social organizations with survey methods. Later, Ray Goodman made significant contributions, particularly refining the K-name snowball sampling technique in the 1960s. This highlights the ongoing development and refinement of this valuable research tool. Now, you are asking, how is snowball sampling used? Snowball sampling shines when we're studying populations that are hard to find using standard methods, like individuals with rare diseases, members of specific subcultures, or undocumented immigrants. We start with a few willing participants, building trust and leveraging their networks to reach others. Now, let us now move on to the advantages and disadvantages of snowball sampling. Let's look at the key advantages. First, access. Snowball sampling grants access to populations otherwise difficult to reach. Second, trust. Participants often feel more comfortable sharing sensitive information within their established networks. Third, cost effectiveness. It leverages existing social networks, making it a more budget-friendly option than many other methods. Fourth, flexibility. It adapts well to diverse communities and situations. And finally, efficiency. It can significantly speed up participant recruitment. And now, the disadvantages of snowball sampling. Of course, no method is perfect. Snowball sampling has limitations, such as sampling bias. Sampling bias is a major concern. Referrals tend to attract individuals with similar characteristics, potentially limiting the diversity of perspectives. Also, lack of cooperations. Even with referrals, some individuals may still be unwilling to participate. It's crucial to acknowledge this limitation and mitigate them through careful planning and ethical considerations. Now, let me give you examples of snowball sampling. Let's look at some real-world applications. Snowball sampling has been successfully used to study homeless populations, drug user community, immigrant experiences, the impact of HIV or AIDS, and even small business networks. I will give a brief explanation for each example to highlight how snowball sampling addresses the challenges of assessing each population. Studying homeless populations. Researchers can start by interviewing a few homeless individuals at a local shelter and then ask them to refer other homeless people they know. Second, researching drug user communities. Researchers can begin with participants from a rehab center and ask them to refer other drug users they know. Third, exploring immigrant experiences. Researchers can start with a small group of immigrants and ask them to refer friends and family members. Fourth, investigating HIV/AIDS impact. Researchers can start with patients from a clinic and ask them to refer other individuals living with HIV. Now, how does snowball sampling become helpful to students? This technique is particularly relevant for students. Imagine a student researching the experiences of undocumented immigrants in their state. Snowball sampling provides a powerful way to access often hidden population and gather valuable first-hand accounts. Snowball sampling is primarily used in qualitative research. Why? Because it focuses on in-depth understanding and rich data from a specific group, rather than broad statistical representativeness. It's ideal, it's ideal for exploring complex phenomena, collecting rich data through interviews and focus groups, and building trust with participants, especially when dealing with sensitive topics. Qualitative research designs that use snowball sampling. This method aligns well with several qualitative research designs, including ethnographic studies, because researchers immerse themselves in a particular culture or community to understand their behaviors, beliefs, and practices. Then, grounded jury. Researchers develop juries based on data collected from participants, often using snowball sampling to identify individuals with relevant experiences. Next, we have case studies. Researchers conduct in-depth investigations of specific individuals, groups, or organizations. And lastly was the phenomenological studies. Researchers explore the life experiences of individuals to understand their, their perspectives and interpretation of a particular phenomenon. In conclusion, snowball sampling is a valuable tool for researchers studying hard-to-reach populations. It provides access to hidden groups and enables efficient data collection. However, researchers must be mindful of potential biases and ethical considerations. When used thoughtfully and ethically, snowball sampling can yield rich, insightful data that significantly enhances our understanding of specific communities and populations. Thank you.
Quota sampling. Quota sampling is a non-probability sampling method that relies on the selection of a predetermined number or proportion. In quota, you will first divide the population into mutually exclusive subgroups and then recruit sample units until you reach your quota. The first thing that you need to do is to clearly define the population you want for your study. The population is the entire group of individuals with the same characteristics. For instance, you want to conduct a research about the effect of Facebook to the Monday students. So basically, your population is the number of all Monday students that studies at Polymer Development Academy Incorporated, particularly those Monday students that are using Facebook. Then, if you already defined your population, you must divide them into subgroups based on their characteristics. However, you must make sure that you divided your subgroup based on their relevance to your study. So you can break down your subgroup based on their age, gender, grades, and strands as well. Next, you need to calculate the number of each subgroup to the population. Therefore, you will divide the number of individuals in each subgroup to the equal number of population. For example, if there are 2,000 Mundimarian students that are using Facebook and 1,000 from them are from senior high school departments, specifically from the UM strand. Then the proportion of a UM students is 50% because 1,000 is 50% of 2,000. Once you know the number of individuals in each subgroup in the population, you can now start to set quota for each subgroup in the population. Therefore, you need to decide if how many individuals from each subgroup that you will include in your study. However, the quota should be proportional to the proportion of individuals in the population. For example, if you were going to conduct a research on the effects of Facebook on the 2000 population of Polymer Development Academy Incorporated that are using Facebook, then 1,000 or 50% from the is a senior high school student from the strand of humanities and social sciences or HUMS, then you should include 1,000 HUMS students in your sample, but you should divide them into subgroups and start quota based on their proportion. For example, you would divide them based on their age, gender, and strand. For instance, age that ranges from 17 to 18 years old, gender, female and male, strand, humanities and social sciences or youth. But maybe some of you is wondering, how does quota sampling differ from stratified sampling? Well, both methods involve dividing the population into subgroups based on specific characteristics. In addition, both aim to create a sample that is the representative of the population. However, stratified sampling uses random sampling within each subgroup, while quota sampling uses non-random selection. Therefore, stratified sampling provides more control over the sample composition as it ensures random selection within each participant. Basically, because of random selection of stratified sampling, each stratum in the sample is accurately reflecting the proportions and variability of the population. Thus, the accurate representation allows researchers to generalize from the sample to the entire population. The researcher is also able to calculate intervals and perform hypotheses, making statistically valid inferences about the population. On the other hand, the quota sampling is a non-random selection, so the researcher has the authority to pick the participants based on their judgments or convenience. So because of the selection is non-random, there is a higher risk of bias and there is a possibility that the participant might not accurately present the diversity within the stratum. Therefore, the quota sampling limits the ability to make statistically valid inferences about the population as a whole.
Hello everyone, I'm Fiona Ramos and I'm here to conclude our discussion on sampling techniques. Throughout this video, we've explored various sampling methods, each with its own unique characteristics and application. Let's recap the key points from each method. First, we have simple random sampling. It is the bedrock of unbiased sampling, offering every individual in the population an equal opportunity to be part of the sample. It's a go-to when the population is relatively homogeneous. Stratified sampling, on the other hand, takes into the account of heterogeneity of the population by dividing it into strata. This ensures that each subgroup is proportionally represented, providing a more comprehensive view. Cluster sampling is a practical choice for large, geographically spread out population. By sampling clusters instead of individual elements, it simplifies the sampling process. Systematic sampling offers a straightforward approach of selecting nth element, but one must be cautious of underlying patterns in the population list. Convenience sampling, while easy and quick, comes with the drawback of potential bias as it relies on readily available individuals. Next, volunteer sampling has its place, especially when reaching specific groups, but it's prone for self-selection bias. Snowball sampling is a valuable tool assessing hard-to-reach populations, starting with a small group and expanding through referrals. Lastly, quota sampling shares similarities with stratified sampling in creating subgroups, but it lacks the random selection within those subgroups. When it comes to choosing the right sampling technique for your research, several factors come into play. First and foremost, clearly define your research question. This will guide you in determining which method is more appropriate for gathering the data you need. Consider the characteristics of your population, such as its size, diversity, and accessibility. The resources of your disposal, including time, budget, and personnel, also play a crucial role in deciding the feasibility of different methods. Additionally, think about the level of precision required for your study. If you need a highly accurate results, you may need to select for a more rigorous sampling method. In summary, sampling is a fundamental aspect of research that enables us to draw meaningful conclusions about population from a sample. By understanding the strengths and limitations of each sampling technique, you can inform decisions that will enhance the validity and reliability of your research findings. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of sampling techniques. If you have any questions or thoughts, please share them below in the comment section. And remember to subscribe to our channel for more insightful content on sampling method or techniques and related topics.